Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Carson. I'm in the Federal Hybrid Cloud Group at IBM, and my role is Hybrid Cloud Account Manager supporting the United States Navy and Marine Corps. Today's webinar is being sponsored by the IBM Hybrid Cloud Navy, Marine, and Air Force teams at IBM. Today's webinar is being recorded for the purposes of playback, so if you're opposed to it being recorded, please disconnect at this time. The webinar today is on Blueworks Live. It's a webinar that's tailored especially for federal customers. I hope everyone can see the webinar all right. Right now, you should be able to see the intro slide that has my contact information, Craig Carson, as well as my colleague, Mike Scolo, and the presenter for today, Chase Horvath's contact information as well. Tomorrow, all attendees of today's webinar will receive a follow-up email, and in that follow-up email, there will be a link to a replay for the webinar. So if you've missed something during the webinar today, you can go back and listen to the playback and get the information that you need. You can also share that link with colleagues that may be interested in learning more about Blueworks Live. The presentation and demo last about 45 minutes to 1 hour. And at the end of the demo, we'll have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So if you have questions today during the presentation or the demo, we'd ask that you would submit those questions via the QA feature that's a part of the webinar interface. So if you have questions, please submit those questions. And then at the end of the demo, we will answer those questions first that were submitted via the question and answer interface. And then if we have time, we'll move on to and let people use the raise your hand feature. We will unmute your line and you can ask your questions live if you have any other additional questions. Now I'd like to introduce the presenter of today's webinar, Chase Horvath. Chase Horvath is a hybrid cloud technical specialist. He is focused on DevOps and cloud technologies, including software as a service. Prior to working at IBM, Chase spent 5 years implementing DevOps and software development lifecycle management software for the Marine Corps. I'm sure you'll enjoy Chase's presentation and demo today on Blueworks Live. It's a special webinar tailored for federal customers. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chase. Chase, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Craig. Hello, everyone. My name is Chase Horvath, and thank you very much for your time today. We're going to see a pretty short slideshow, and then we'll jump right into a live demo. I'm going to go kind of fast and keep it as interesting as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so what is Blueworks Live? First off, it's a tool that's specifically built for easy and collaborative process discovery, optimization, and documentation. So discover, optimize, and document your processes. The focus is really on simplicity and collaboration, and this is to allow everyone in your organization to use it. This means you can capture the most accurate as-is processes and get the most input on your to-be processes. So it's also a full enterprise-ready product. User groups and all, it can act as a central repository and provide governance to changes in your processes. It's a cloud-based solution, so there's nothing to install. You're instantly up and running with a web browser. User invites are very simple and designed to take minimal effort, and the whole thing is software as a service. Like I said, it's a cloud-based solution. All right, so how does Blueworks Live fit in with the kind of complete catalog of process automation capabilities at IBM? There are 3 main areas here that really build on each other. The first, discovery at the top in maroon, is where you are finding out what your processes are, gaining consensus from all the parties involved, and empowering your organization to execute your processes with consistency and with confidence. The other area, automation in teal, builds on those discovered processes and seeks to increase execution speed and consistency by removing the human element where applicable. And then the third piece, in blue in the bottom right, this is the insights piece. So this is where you start using all that data you're generating and collecting during your process executions to improve those processes and pull out information that we as humans tend to have a tough time discovering on our own. So Blueworks Live fits right there at the top as a collaborative discovery platform. So what's the problem with really gathering your team into a room and hashing this all out on a whiteboard? What's the problem we're trying to solve here with this product? I would say that that meeting and that whiteboard are pretty much the problems. You might not realize it, but you're actually operating in a vacuum there. You really cannot involve everyone you need to get the information you want. And the processes you draw at best will end up locked away in a Visio file that only a few people on the project can open because that's all that have Visio, and nobody ever even looks at because it gets put away on someone's hard drive somewhere. So what ends up happening is a single group ends up making decisions that involve multiple groups, and that just down the road leads to arguments, inefficiency, and inconsistency between your groups. That hurts your organization. So Blueworks Live tries to solve this problem by giving everyone involved the ability to weigh in on the process definition, then making the knowledge available to everyone so that it can be acted on. This leads to knowledgeable employees making informed and consistent decisions that work well for your organization and those that it interacts with. So Blueworks Live is a very flexible tool. It can model just about any interaction that can be broken down into steps. Some of the things you model might be very simple, some might be very complex, but the important thing is that because of the collaborative nature of building processes in Blueworks Live, the participants in the processes can span across different departments or organizations. For example, seemingly internal processes such as HR, document signings, and DevOps tool chains typically are contained within a single organization, but probably involve people from different departments and different chains of command. Those people can be difficult to bring together. The inter-organization processes such as purchasing, blockchain design, and asset tracking, those absolutely involve people from entirely different entities and different organizations. In each instance, these processes can be difficult to define and standardize, so that's why we designed Blueworks Live to bring everyone together and allow it to really shine in that collaborative process discovery. So who's using Blueworks Live? It's already a very popular product, so you don't have to take any huge risk of being a first adopter here. It's widely used across the government and private industry with great success, and that includes the Department of Defense. Typically, people do what works, and that's how we got to having over 1 million processes documented in the tool. So it's already a very, very, very popular product. All right, so the point of this webinar, what have we done specifically for federal customers to help make Blueworks Live usable and valuable? First and foremost, we host this for federal customers in data centers that only serve federal customers. So those data centers meet FedRAMP and FISMA moderate requirements, and we added extra security and backup features above what is available for our commercial customers. We also made it easy to use and reasonably priced with flexible software as a service licensing so that you can engage all the parties you need without having to secure training or make big sacrifices on your budget. We have added governance features that allow you to automate your reviews and approvals, as well as automatically generate the documentation you may need to include the processes you make in your paper documents that have to get passed around and signed, which hopefully you will document that process in Blueworks Live. Lastly, we have based this product off of BPMN 2.0 standards so that the processes you create are written in a universally accepted notation. Let's talk about integration. We've made Blueworks Live easy to integrate with because we hope that someday we're going to take the knowledge you gather with it and then use a heavy-hitting automation tool to automate it. That would definitely be success for us. So we allow you to import and export in the most common and open source formats so that you're not locked into any specific tools in the future. You can also extend the use of Blueworks Live using the API. And the API has some powerful functions such as user management, reporting, and launching tasks. We even have customers who actually, they built an OSLC adapter so that Blueworks Live could be integrated into their open source software toolchains. All right, thank you. I promised you I'd keep the slideshow short. And now we're on to a live demo. Afterwards, please feel free to sign up for a free trial at blueworkslive.com, and then you'll be able to try it for yourself. So I'm gonna get to my demo real quick. Okay, so after you sign up for your free trial, this is the first screen you're going to see when you log in. So right off the bat, there's a brief tutorial and some examples for your new users. Like I said, Blueworks Live is designed to be simple, and this tutorial is definitely enough to get you and your users up and running in just a few minutes. The first thing I really want to show you is how easy it is to get in here and start defining your own processes. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to zoom in real quick so you have a better view. But this is just an example process that you're provided with right off the bat, and I can immediately begin making it my own. You can see across the top I have some tools, and adding a new step or component to this process is as simple as just clicking on the line. So I have a few options of the type of component or block I would like to add, but keep in mind all these options are in line with the BPMN 2.0 standards. So I'm going to add a few steps to this workflow, and let's just say I want to make it, we want to inspect the product before we actually transfer the funds. So I'm going to include a gateway, and I'm going to ask if the product was satisfactory, and I'm also going to include a step for product inspection. And I can begin clicking and dragging things just to move them around. It's actually really easy. I can move things from one milestone or column to the next. And I can also add more swim lanes or milestones as I need. So I'm going to add a milestone for inspection so that we can put that product inspection section we just made into that. So I'm going to add a swim lane. Sorry, I'm going to add a milestone, call it inspection. And I'm going to drag it before I make payment, and I'm going to drag the components I want inside of it. So that's as easy as that. And now I can also rename things on the fly too. So I'm going to rename this swim lane maintenance because I'm going to say that maintenance is the main actor in this process. All right. So now maintenance's responsibility during the inspection milestone is to perform a product inspection and decide whether or not it was satisfactory. So that's how easy it is to get in and just start at a high level making your process. If I want to dive deeper into the process definition, I can store lots of metadata in each block. So let's take a look at the provide cost estimate block real quick. I just double clicked on that. There are a lot of built-in fields, and you can also add your own. The most prevalent fields here are participant, which correlates to swim lane in the diagram. There's also, if I scroll down, inputs and outputs, and there's also quantitative fields such as cost and cycle time, and I can use these in analysis later. The other tabs here store things like attached files and comments, which I can also store at the process level or at the individual step level. So if I scroll back up to the top, the participant field is already filled out as a service provider because the provide cost estimate task is in the service provider swim lane. That's their responsibility. And I'm going to add some inputs and outputs for this activity. The input is going to be a work order request. And I'm going to say that the output is going to be a cost estimate. So Blueworks Live is heavily object-oriented, and now that I have created this cost estimate value, that's actually going to immediately and automatically become an object in my glossary. And I can add metadata to it right here as well. So I can mouse over cost estimate. It's going to ask me to add a description. So I'm going to say a cost estimate for a maintenance work order request. So now that that data is in there, I can go to the glossary by clicking on the pencil to the right, and then I will actually see the term in the glossary and all the metadata that's being built with it. So I've clicked on that pencil. So you can see here that the entry has been made for cost estimate, and this glossary will be automatically built and further fleshed out as you create your processes and your metadata. So now we've seen that, let's go back to the process diagram real quick. So staying true to the collaborative roots, there are a lot of places comments can be added. I can add comments to entire processes or get more granular by adding them to glossary terms or entire individual steps or milestones, and I can also go at the entire process level. Also, if two people are working on the same process at the same time, they will actually see each other's changes in real time. Just like you see in Google Docs when two people are typing, I can watch somebody type. I can also watch someone add blocks and drag them to different places in the process as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a comment to the provide cost estimate step. And I'm just going to say that I think it's incorrect because the accounting department has to approve this first. So I'm going to open up that step. I'm going to add a comment. You see I've done this before on there, but I'm going to say, I disagree. So I've added that comment there. So now, if I end my edits and I just go to view the process, I'll actually be able to see all of my comments in one place. So I'm going to go up here and click End Edits. So now I'm in view mode. And down in the bottom right, you can see is where the comments show up. Kind of segueing out of comments, but back to the automatic documentation side. The metadata and comments automatically get rolled up into documentation that Blueworks Live is generating for me. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to click on the documentation tab. So here's my home base for generating the documentation. And I'm going to expand the provide cost estimate step just because that's one we've been working with. And I can see the inputs and outputs here over kind of in the middle right. And I can also see the comments down on the bottom if I come down here. And all of this will be neatly formatted when I can export this to Word or PowerPoint format. That's going to save you a lot of time when you have to start, if you have, say you're using this to model a testing phase or something like that, and you want to put this process in your test plan, you can just export it here and insert it right into your test plan. So let's talk about change control and history real quick. I'm going to go back to my process diagram on the Changes tab, and I'm going to see the history of my Provide Cost Estimation step. So I go back to Process Diagram on the Changes tab over here. I can see all the changes that were made on this step today and in days before. So there is a pretty detailed history being kept here. If I go to my library this process is in, I can then see that all this is rolled up into the activity stream with everything happening in the library, which everyone can see. So if someone hasn't been involved in documenting the process in a few days, they can log in and see kind of what changes have been made. So let me go to my library real quick. So on the left, you see the activity stream with all of my actions in it. I can actually continue to expand that. You see I made 16 changes. So it's definitely very detailed. And in addition to tracking changes, we also support snapshots. So let me go back into my process and show you guys taking a snapshot real quick. I go into Edit, click the snapshot. So a snapshot is just as you would imagine, it's a picture of the process in a time and place. So I'm going to name this snapshot webinar. If I hit enter, what's going to happen is it's going to save that snapshot. And now I can publish this snapshot and I can revert back to it later after other changes are made if I want to. So what I'm going to do right now to show you this works, I'm going to actually revert back to the original snapshot. And now I'm like new again, just where we started. And I can advance this back up to the snapshot I took before. All right, so kind of next topic. I promise you guys this product will also help you not just document, but analyze your process as well. So let's talk about that. One of the analysis tools in Blueworks Live is this playback feature, which will allow you to analyze the metadata that you built into your process as you step through it. So give me a second and I'm gonna load up a sample process that's gonna be a hiring example, and we'll take a look at walking through that process with metadata and tallying that metadata as we go. So I went up to my library and I went to a space called webinar examples, and in here there's a candidate selection process that I made. So here it is, and I'll back out so you can get a better view. It's probably better. So I have assigned a cost to each value or to each step in here. So a cost value has been assigned to every step here. And then I've also gone through and I've saved several executions of the process that follow different paths. So I'm going to walk through each of those executions and I'm going to compare the cost. So this type of functionality is not only useful for analysis, but it's also good if you want to provide an example execution for someone who might be new to a process. So it's good for training purposes as well. So I'm going to enter playback mode. And what I want to do is I want to analyze cost. So at the top, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select cost. And you can see that I can analyze just about any of the metadata that I've actually put in there and have assigned values to. So I've saved several playbacks. You can see them on the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to zoom out so that you can get a better view of that. The first playback I've saved maps the process from beginning to end. You can see it highlighted here, and that's going to give me the cost of hiring a candidate. If I hired the first candidate I found, they went all the way through the process, that's going to give me that cost. The second playback that I've made, that you can now see highlighted, maps the cost of each additional candidate that makes it to the interview process but fails there. So they decide not to hire that candidate. So that maps the cost of that. And the third maps the cost of deciding that a candidate is ineligible for the position even before they make it into an interview. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to see what I can find out by analyzing those three costs and walking through each one. So I'm going to go back to my first recording. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to walk through it. And you can see as I go, the sections are highlighted, and in the bottom, kind of in the bottom next to my controls, the cost is added up as I walk through that. So I can see that the total cost for hiring a candidate from beginning to end is calculated to be $720. However, we know that many times multiple candidates are interviewed, and I want to know how much that affects cost. So I'm now going to step through the second save execution, which models the cost of a candidate being interviewed but not being hired. So this is, I'm now on my second recording. I'm going to walk through that. Scheduling the interview, actual interview, and then we decide that this candidate is not a good fit. So that's going through that, and now we see the cost of that is $570. That's a large chunk of my total cost for the entire process. If I were to go through and step through all the recordings, I would see that there is a substantially lower cost associated with making a candidate ineligible before I actually have an interview. Thus, I want to make sure that my process for making a candidate ineligible before an interview is effective. I want to weed out all the candidates I can because conducting interviews is expensive. Furthermore, I would also see that I spend a large amount of money determining whether or not these candidates are eligible. So I would definitely want to deep dive into that step and make sure that it's being as effective as possible and make sure that I have it defined very well. So within Blueworks Live, there's a ton of functionality that will help you break down individual steps like that, and it'll really define it. I can make decision trees, and I can also kind of create decision matrices that set parameters for different outcomes. It goes way deeper than just this process level diagram, and it really captures the nitty-gritty actions that can be taken. So I'm going to show you that really quickly. If I exit the playback, which I do right down here, and I look at that determine eligibility decision step, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to double click on that and open it up. And if I go to the decisions tab, there's a decision called determine applicant eligibility. And again, this becomes an object, so I can use it at other points in my process or in other processes. So what I have here is a decision tree. This is going to help me round up all the factors that go into determining an applicant's eligibility as part of this process. If I even want to drill down even more, I can further define each one of these blocks. So I'm going to drill down into the years of experience block. So this decision table is going to help the person executing the steps classify the applicant's level according to the years of experience. So it basically makes sure that the person applying for this job has the correct years of experience for the level position they're applying for. This can be used for any number of things, but as you can see, the rabbit hole of process definition gets really deep really quickly. I promise you that the simplicity of the tool, as you've seen, is not lost in your ability to kind of create these deep process definitions. And it's also very easy to cull through and find, so that the people going through and actually executing these processes are able to see this kind of material and execute effectively. All right, so the last two things I want to show you are two example processes that show the flexibility of Blueworks Live. The first is an example model of a blockchain interaction that might occur if a blockchain were being used to track a UAV's life cycle. So I bought a UAV, I used it, and then I decommissioned it. That could be really popular for the Air Force. The second is a DevOps toolchain. So let me go to my library and bring those up. I'll bring up the UAV one first. We'll zoom in so you have a better view. So in this process, you have two parties. You have the Air Force and you have the manufacturer. And in the middle is your blockchain or your hyperledger. And each of these parties are executing smart contracts to record information on that blockchain that tracks the life cycle of that UAV. So this is a very simple mock-up. A real one would include, where each piece of the UAV came from, when and where it flew, when and where it was maintained, and any other data associated with it. But as you can tell, when you start including all those parties in on this, it gets very complicated very quickly. And defining that process involves many parties from many different organizations. And all those parties are going to need to be executing smart contracts against that hyperledger, against that blockchain. So this is where Blueworks Live really steps in as a perfect fit to handle defining processes or a shared process between multiple parties. So let's take a quick look at a DevOps toolchain real quick. I'm going to zoom way out so you can see kind of what's going on here. So this process diagram lays out a DevOps toolchain. All the swim lanes on the left are products like GitHub, Jenkins, and Urban Code. So instead of being a department like HR or accounting, we have toolchain products. Then the milestones along the top are the phases of the software development lifecycle, or maybe phases in the deployment lifecycle. At the top, there's a compound step, in case that's the first one. And I can open this up and collapse it down. And that's just kind of a cool feature. And I can use that to kind of condense and clean up my process a little bit if I want. But this is definitely one of those processes where the inputs and outputs and the metadata is very important. Where you're passing things, what each tool does to it, what it becomes after that, and what format it needs to be submitted in and what format it needs to be deployed in. You can even go as far as to define the integrations between the tools here. Many people may not even think to model this sort of process in this tool, but actually any pipeline is a really great candidate. This tool is really, or this kind of process is really not that different from passing around a piece of paper that has to be signed. Instead of paper, you're passing around code that is synthesized, built, put into change control, and then deployed to different environments. It's all a process, and if you can break it down into steps, you can model it here. So that's all for me. That's all. I hope you all have really enjoyed this and found it informative. And now we can open up questions. And definitely don't forget to sign up for that free trial. So Craig, if you want to open up the lines for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chase. Appreciate you presenting today. Now we'll have a few minutes. Actually, looks like we'll have a few extra minutes for questions. Wanted to remind everybody, actually, I see that we've had some that have submitted questions already via the QA interface. If anybody else has questions, please feel free to submit those. Once we get those questions answered, we will see if anybody wants to ask their question live. We'll have them use their raise the hand feature, and we'll unmute their lines. So let's get started with that, Chase. The first question that came in is, I have several teams who should not be able to see each other's work. Am I able to separate them and control their permissions and visibility?
Yes, absolutely. So again, this is an enterprise class product. It's made to be used by multiple teams, and it's software as a service. So the permissions, simplicity, and effectiveness are always going to be front and center on that type of product. So you can have multiple teams working in different spaces that are completely oblivious to each other's existence, or you could even have some people on either team or both teams that are able to see into other teams' areas or work areas. And you could limit their powers. They could be read-only, or they could be editor or contributor and stuff like that. So yes, the permission structure is very powerful. It's meant to be an enterprise class software as a service product.
Great. The next question that came in is, am I able to work on a new version of a process while others only see a published version?
Yes. So that actually goes very closely to the snapshots that I was showing you. I can take one of those snapshots and post it to be, I guess you saw it on the interface, the published version. And then I can set certain users to, in certain spaces, only be able to see published versions. And that's going to do is that's going to allow my team to continuously tweak and modify processes, and make all the comments and all the things that you might not want external parties to see while you're making your process, and then publish a snapshotted version out, which will be the official version that's in use and in circulation while you continue to work and improve that process in the background.
Thank you, Chase. The next one that I see here is there any way to track the progress of a process execution as it is completed? Interesting
question. Yes and no. So for the process diagrams that we were just building, and I was just showing you, no, those are not executable processes. That is purely for discovery, collaboration, and documentation. That being said, those can be exported in the BPMN 2.0 format or any of the other compatible formats that Blueworks Live supports into a heavyweight process automation tool, and thus is a really good starting point for automating your process in that tool. There's also a whole other side of Blueworks Live, which was not the focus of today's webinar, but it allows you to create small, simple process apps. And you can basically, you make a process template. It's not the full diagram like you saw, but it allows you to order actions, put them in series or in parallel, set due dates, set reminders, assign specific people to a task, It will notify you when people are able to complete that task. So there is a process execution side of Blueworks Live, but it is not the modeling that we saw today. And I'm more than happy to go into that in depth with who is asking this question. Definitely catch up with me after the webinar, and we'll dive into that side of Blueworks Live.
The next question that came in is, I need a way to document our proposal writing and review process. It needs to show the approvals, where information comes from, who remediates, etc. Can this tool be used to model a process like that?
Yes, that's a perfect candidate. We actually get that exact process modeled in it several times as a proposal goes through its review stages, pink teams and the red teams, and then who has to remediate it, who's collecting, who's collecting all the comments from the viewers and stuff like that. That's a perfect candidate, and especially if you want your entire organization to use the same process, and you can model that process in here, post it up, and then make sure everyone is able to get to it, and then everyone has clear visibility and everyone knows what it is. You don't have the instance where you have someone new comes onto the proposal team, and you have to shuffle around and maybe find an old diagram of the process that someone had in Visio, or maybe just draw it on chalkboard. And that's how processes kind of morph over time and become incorrect and ineffective, is when you have kind of the tribal knowledge of the process. But in something like that, you would have this central repository that would be able to hold that kind of process and make it more effective and consistent.
Thanks, Chase. We have one more question that was submitted via the QA interface. So after we answer this one, it looks like we'll have time. If anybody has a question that they would like to answer live, if you can go in and use the raise your hand feature when we get done with this question, we will see if there's anybody who wants to ask a question live. So here's the last one that was submitted. It is there an internal chat software? My team does not have one, and it would be great for when we are collaborating. Right.
So yes, there is. If your team does not have an enterprise class chat software, I could not recommend everyone logging into Blueworks Live 24/7 and using that as their enterprise class chat software. However, the chat software in there, it is good. It allows you to talk to the people who you're collaborating on your processes with. It'll keep a history. It's a very powerful tool. It's very quick. It's right there on your screen when you're using it. And especially when you have a few people in there working on the same process at the same time, geographically disconnected, and they want to leave messages to each other, or you're watching each other move blocks around the screen, and you might not be on the phone, or you might have someone who just can't call in at that time. It's a really good way to talk.
Thanks, Chase. That was the last question, and so far I don't see anybody who has raised their hand. I'll give it just a minute more. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask live, please use the raise your hand feature. All right, Chase, I don't see anybody that has raised their hand. So I think with that, we'll give everybody a little bit of their time back today, and we will end the webinar. Chase, thank you very much for presenting today. I appreciate it. Wanted to remind everybody one last time that everybody that attended the webinar today will receive a follow-up email tomorrow. That email will have a link to the playback so that you can view the webinar again if you would like. Please feel free to share that link with colleagues who may be interested in learning more about Blueworks Live. Thank you for attending today. This concludes today's webinar. Have a great day.